Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
Innovative Thinkers, episode number 259. Innovative Thinkers. Our guests have sent us so much swag, books, and giveaways this year. I can't wait to announce our monthly winner. So if you want exclusive content delivered right to your inbox and to enter into our monthly drawing, go to drfrancesrichards.com and subscribe to our mailing list. That's drfrancesrichards.com. drfrancesrichards.com. That's drfrancesrichards.com and subscribe to our mailing list. We promise we will not spam you or sell your information. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black entrepreneur experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. A former teacher at Copenhagen Business School, president and CEO of Alom, a supply chain company. Welcome, Hannah Kain.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, Frances, and look forward to the discussion.
I've given our audience such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with us what you'd like us to know about you and your business?
I started my personal life in the town of Hans Christian Andersen in Odense, Denmark. And in 1990, I immigrated to the US. In 1997, I and a group of supply chain technologists started Alom. And we do supply chain management. So we've grown it since 97 to today to be out of 19 locations globally. We serve mainly Fortune 100 clients. We are working in the technology, medical, automotive, and very regulated sectors such as utilities. And certainly we have a number of very high visibility brands in those sectors. And what we do for them is we take on specific supply chain projects and we execute on those projects out of our facilities. So we design the supply chain, starting with getting suppliers in, purchasing from them. We put materials into our warehouses. We manage the materials. We do assembly and production of those parts. And then we do the distribution, whether to distribution centers, to businesses, or to homes. So it's the full spectrum of the supply chain. And we are always thinking about how we can do it more effectively, efficiently, and get the product out to the consumer in the best manner.
And so, Hannah, what was that aha moment that you knew that your business was going to be successful, and why did you choose that industry, supply chain?
Well, supply chain is such a fantastic industry to be in. And, I felt it was very challenging and very interesting to see products come together. And being headquartered in Silicon Valley, we have access to a lot of different, very innovative technology. And so the merge between the physical world and the technology world was very interesting to me. So I think seeing those things merge in a very complex manner is just very fulfilling. But more than that, I think it turned out that it was a fantastic area to be in because it's such a growth area. It's such an area with changes and challenges. And so we are solving some really extremely important problems for our customers and for the world at large. As now during COVID times, we are shipping COVID testing kits, producing and shipping COVID testing kits all over the US, and really get to do a lot of good through our supply chain knowledge. But, I've always said I think supply chain is a fantastic career. And if we've got young listeners to this podcast, I'd say supply chain is where to go We know that just in the US alone, we are going to be at least 2 million people short in supply chain over the next decade. We know that there's a lot of career opportunities. There are opportunities at all levels in supply chain, from production floor to the boardroom. So it's really a fantastic opportunity for anybody who wants to roll up their sleeves and be part of creating physical products, but also digital products, frankly.
Someone is listening to this podcast, Hannah, and they're saying, wow, that's intriguing. And they're saying, I want to get started in supply chain. What advice would you give them to gain the knowledge to start in supply chain?
Well, as I said, there are many different ways to have a career in supply chain. So you can, if you want to, you can start on the assembly floor. And I see a lot of people who are starting just on the assembly floor and working their way up. You know, supply chain is a very inclusive area. So you can really work your way, as I said, all the way to the C-suite and into the boardrooms from the production line. And I've seen examples of that. You can also study supply chain. There are many universities, colleges that offer supply chain opportunities, or you can come to it from, for instance, technology. So when you look at supply chain, I mean, being able to understand data and how to process data and think about that, really important, because supply chain is also about visibility. Which products are there? Well, how are they moving through the systems, etc. So I'd say there are many different ways to go about it. If you start on a practical level, then you can always add later. There are lots of opportunities for developing. And if you start from a theoretical level, certainly there are ways to get also the practical knowledge. I'd say anybody in supply chain needs to have both. You need to understand and see how things actually work. Supply chain is not a good place for people who just want to sit in ivory towers. You need to really understand what's going on. It's kind of like owning a restaurant chain. If you've never been in the kitchen, that doesn't work. You need to understand what's going on. And I think most people in supply chain have a love for creating something tangible, something you can actually hold and deal with, etc. And many of us do it also because we see that we can do a lot of good in supply chain, whether it's creating job opportunities or furthering diverse businesses or creating products and opportunities for consumers, for instance, now in the medical market.
There are so many brands and businesses, Hannah, that are dominating. Talk about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
Oh, in supply chain, I don't know. I mean, certainly, I think some of the big carriers are doing a good job. So if I had to say, UPS is dealing very well also now with the COVID situation. As we know, during the pandemic, the e-commerce volume went up really, really tremendously. And they've been doing a pretty good job at dealing with those fluctuations. I also like that they are a very inclusive company. So there's lots to like about them. Personally, I am a believer that a lot of the innovation and new thought process are coming from small and mid-sized companies. And so I'm not so fascinated by the thought that bigger is better. I think that there are lots of small companies out there that's going to define the future. And especially when it comes to the innovative technology solutions out there. I do believe that some of the small companies that now maybe only have 10 employees may be the future. So I have a hard time maybe idolizing some of the big companies. If I had to mention another company I have a lot of respect for, it would be The Gap. I think that they have a lot of inclusivity and lots of good thinking about how to serve their community in the right way and optimizing their supply chain that way.
Talk about raising capital. How did you raise capital to start your company?
Oh, I did it the hard way, right? So I think there are different ways to think about how you raise capital and you grow your company. And some people go out and raise angel investors and get into VC funding, and they want to maybe go public. And that is one journey. I wanted to keep it private. I wanted to keep it as a woman-owned company. And in order to do that, you need to write some checks from your personal account. And I was fortunate that my husband and I had put some money aside, but not enough to start a company and the size and financial commitment that I had ambitions to do for Alom. So I went out to get an SBA loan. And to get an SBA loan, you need to get a bank to underwrite the loan. But the banks were kind of telling me I was crazy. I had this weird vision about that you could produce product and ship it same day, so that it could be in somebody else's hands next day. And in 1997, that was like the weirdest thing people had heard about. So I had a hard time getting traction with it. And today I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs, and they go, oh yeah, we went and did presentation to 2 banks, and they just don't want to talk with us. Well, Francis, I went and talked with 32 banks before. So I did 32 presentations before I found a bank that was willing to step up. And so I worked with them and SBA and ended up doing actually 3 different SBA term loans of pretty good size. Ended up being Entrepreneur of the Year for SBA in the Bay Area, and paid back the loans. And then, of course, it's all about being cash flow positive at that point of time. So you've got to watch the expenses, watch the customers, and watch that the customers are happy, and then create profit from there. And you can grow based on the profitability. It's a tough route, but it has a lot of gratifications also. And there's no right or wrong route. There's only selecting what is right for you. And so when people say, oh, Hannah, we want to do the same as you, I'll go, no, do whatever is right for you, right? Because I decided which battles were battles I wanted to fight and which I didn't want to fight so much. So if you've got some bad years and you are sort of starting out your company cash strapped, well, that's where you may go out of business, or you may be very close to going out of business. And certainly, as I, after a couple of years, encountered some adversity, I had some years that were really tough. I called them the years I was in the salt mines, because we did everything we could to survive, and we survived. But I think if I had had outside investors, they would have gotten cold feet during that time. But I just knew I had to succeed, both for myself, but more importantly for my staff members and my suppliers. And I always feel when companies file Chapter 7 or Chapter 11, it's really tough on the suppliers. We have a very high supplier diversity spend. Last year, we hit 37% of all our purchases were with diverse businesses. And I just don't want to leave them hanging. I mean, they've got to meet the payroll, and I know that payroll goes out in a lot of neighborhoods where there are many unprivileged people in those neighborhoods that would be hard hit if they lose their jobs. And so, I'm very committed to paying our suppliers and paying them in a timely manner.
Talk about legacy. When it's all said and done, Hannah, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered that I did the right thing the right way. Right? And I impacted the people's lives positively around me. I'm very fortunate and I'm very grateful. I inherited from my parents a sense of service to others, but also a happiness gene. And so I like to spread smiles around me, and I also like to pay it forward and do right by the people around me. So I think that's my main legacy. I also like to think new thoughts about supply chain. So again, supply chain is a very changing in discipline. I mean, again, when I started Alom, nobody had heard about supply chain. Sort of 15 years later, you could kind of, when you went to a party, you could talk about that there was something called supply chain, and people would be like, their eyes would sort of gloss over, right? And today, when anybody hears you're in supply chain, they go, whoa, that must be really interesting, right? And I think part of that comes from, of course, the constraints we've had, especially during the pandemic, and the understanding of the complexity in the supply chain. And, just look at, we just have an incoming president who the first day in office talked about supply chain and started 10 days or 15 days later, started doing executive orders around supply chain. I mean, we're talking supply chain all the time on a federal level. And so I think those type of issues really bring supply chain to the forefront. I like to think new thoughts about supply chain, what's the next step, and stay ahead. So, I think another part of my legacy has got to be visionary, though, I've got no illusion because supply chain is just moving so quickly right now that, 20 years from now, anybody will look at what I'm doing and they will go, oh, that's pretty basic stuff, right? But, that's sort of the hindsight for 20 years from now. Right now, I like to look forward and think also for my company, think a couple of years out in the future, 5-10 years out in the future, and see what I see there.
Talk about the worst moment in business and what was your takeaway?
Oh, I've had a couple of really bad moments. I think a year ago, when the pandemic hit, state of California decided to close down, and the Bay Area decided to close down businesses. And we were unaware that we had been named an essential business, so we thought that we had to close. And I had 3 hours to close the company down. And that was both very emotional, but also very challenging. And I still remember the way people pulled together. So I'm saying those were the 3 worst hours of my life. But, I just thought, okay, I've been running companies and being in supply chain. And I know, so I felt very confident that we were doing, and, with a very strong management team, I felt very confident we were doing the best we could under the circumstances, but certainly emotionally, it was hard. And I keep saying anybody who's in supply chain really is coming out of the pandemic with PSTD, right? Because it's just been a tough time. And then, I already touched on it. We went through some really tough times after when we hit some adversity just around year 2000. And, having to prioritize so much and sometimes drag payment out to suppliers and really be concerned about payroll and those type of things, the financial reality hits. And so I think I'm more conservative in how I run the company, and certainly very conscious about cash and what cash means. And when I mentor entrepreneurs, I'm always looking at their cash and cash outlay and cash reserves and how long time can they sustain if something goes south. So when you start a company, I mean, you've got to be this positive person who believes in the idea and believes you can do it. We all have doubts, right? But overall, you need to be very positive and gung-ho on it. And I think you're not thinking about all the adversity that's going to come. And so that's another thing that I've become a little bit more conscious about, that when you run a business, it's not linear. It's not, you go from 0 to a billion, and it's all linear, right? You hit all kinds of speed bumps, and some of the speed bumps can be pretty difficult to get over. And, when you think about it, I think the statistics is that only 1 out of 7 businesses survive the first decade. And I understand why, because you do encounter a lot of difficulties. And I see it among my friends who are running businesses. If they have some business difficulties and all of a sudden fate hits them on a personal level too, they get sick kids, or whatever the situation can be, insurmountable. So I think that thought about things not being linear, you get a little bit more to, you step back and say, okay, this is another speed bump, right? And what I built last year, I've got to give up, but then I'll come back later, right? And make it up. So that entire thought process, I think, is a big takeaway as you encounter difficulties. And then finally, I think it's surrounding yourself with people who are not yay-sayers, but believers, right? They need to believe in you and the company. And so that's on a company basis, but also personally, you need to have your own group of people who really believe in you and will tell you the truth. And, the people tell you every time you do something wrong, right? But do it in a loving and supporting manner. I've always believed in hiring the best people I could hire. Just if I cannot hire somebody who is at the level where they can really be a star performer, I'd rather leave that position unfilled. I need people who are really performing at a very high level around me, people who are working better than me in their field, who understands what they are doing, so that I don't feel like I've got to baby them or look over their shoulders. So for the entrepreneurs out there, hire the best people. I see it all the time that people hire somebody, they go, oh, that's the best I can afford right now. But they know that it's somebody who really doesn't have sufficient skills. And then they see, oh, now I need to step in because that didn't go so well, so I've got to step in. And finally, they get to the thought, oh, I've got to do everything myself. And it's holding entrepreneurs back. If you've got to do everything yourself, guess what? You're the limiting factor on whether the company can grow. So that's another big takeaway for entrepreneurs is hire the best you can think of and hire people you're really happy having on your team.
Advice you wish you had followed.
That I wish I had followed? Oh, I think maybe when I look back, and this is probably a function of the time also that I started when I started my career. It took me a long time to be what you could call an authentic leader. I did a lot of things that I felt I had to do to put on a face to be not necessarily myself, whether it was, I never get sick. Well, of course I get sick, right? Everybody gets sick every once in a while, whether they get a cold or whatever, I had to always feel I was a strong, insurmountable, etc. And I've become way more authentic. And I think some people started hinting at that very early on in my career, that they felt, they didn't see the entire Hannah. And I do believe that I should have just embraced that earlier. But it was a little bit a function of the time. I want to say, everybody was telling you just had to put on a certain face, and I did that. And along with those is also, for a long time, I was just trying to conform. And a couple of people, I went into a mentorship program when I was in my late 20s. And I think when I look back at the big takeaway there, it was don't worry so much about conforming. But it took me a long time to really embrace that we're different and I'm different and I've got something to bring to the table just because I'm different. It's not a barrier to be different. It's an advantage. And I think everybody's feeling that they're different from the masses. I think we've got ideas about what others maybe feel, that others may feel, they're part of the main clique or they're part of the mainstream. But I think everybody have this idea, do I belong and what's my contribution and will the others accept me and all those type of things. And if when I look back over my life, I wish maybe I had embraced my difference earlier as opposed to trying to conform.
What is the best decision you made as a leader?
Oh, I'm always saying I hope that's a decision I make later today or tomorrow, right? And if it's not the best decision, if I don't believe that, I should hang it up as a leader, right? But I think overall it's deciding to become an entrepreneur. I kind of had a dream very early on. I'm always saying that I'm thinking that I started thinking entrepreneurship when I was 4. That's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's correct that when I was a teenager, when other people dreamed, when other girls dreamed about Prince Charming, I was more dreaming about starting a company and what it would feel like, etc. And I think taking the jump and doing that was the best decision I ever made. And, because I started feeling that I was doing what I really loved to do. I was pulling on some of my strengths. I was having fun doing it. Not always, as you understand, but overall, I was having a lot of fun doing it, and I still have a lot of fun doing it. So, I think being an entrepreneur and helping others start companies, I think really gives me a lot of satisfaction.
What problem exists in the world today, Hannah, that you would like to solve?
Oh, that is a really difficult question, right? There's a lot of problems that exist out there that I feel we should solve. Anything from health issues throughout the world, food, certainly inequities and discrimination and unfair treatment, right? Human rights violations. And, I had the privilege, you didn't mention this, but, I had a political career in Denmark before I immigrated, and I had the opportunity to be part of the parliamentary delegation to the United Nations. It made a big impression on me to work in the United Nations and seeing some of the big problems that they are trying to solve, get water to everybody, those type of things, helping kids throughout the world, just lots of problems. I don't know that I really want to one particular one. I am very much a nature and animal lover, right? So I am very concerned about what's going on with the globe and with the animal population and the entire sustainability area. So my company has some really substantial sustainability initiatives to impact what we can, but certainly in the bigger perspective of things, that's a big issue. And also seen from a supply chain standpoint, of course, the climate change has a big impact on natural disasters, which impact directly the supply chain and the disruptions. So many issues out there. What gives me heart is seeing how many people are involved in solving the issues and trying to find solution to the issues. And so my role right now, as I'm very focused on running my company and doing what I can for my chair, my role is to support them and encourage them in what they are doing, and got lots of positive thoughts around what's going on. Again, I'm an optimist in that I believe that we can do better and we will do better as humans. One thing that happened over the last decade was we took and doubled the income as humanity. We doubled the income for the poorest people in the world. And those are some of the types of progress that I really would like to see more of.
What is your biggest achievement so far in life or business?
Oh, that's a very difficult question, Francis. You're asking me some really deep questions here. I think it's all the people I've stopped up and brought with me along the way, whether it's as employees, as suppliers, as people I've mentored. So I make of trying to pay it forward. I feel very fortunate and grateful for what the opportunities I've had and the support I've been given. And so paying it forward is a big part of my value set. And I think doing that both internally in the company and externally probably is my biggest achievement. But certainly, I think that contributing to the fields I'm in, right, contributing positively is probably my biggest achievement.
Hannah, if someone wrote an autobiography about you, what would the title be?
Ooh, that's difficult. Well, I was always making fun and saying it could be in the ladies' room because, I've done business in the ladies' room, right? I do a lot of business with other women, and sometimes we just stand and chat in the ladies' room, so that could be one title, a little bit tongue in cheek, right? But it could be the right thing, doing the right thing the right way. Right? I'm very committed to both looking at what is it we're doing and how are we doing it. So trying to, I believe in servant leadership, right? So servant leadership being you look at yourself, how can you serve the people around you, not putting yourself first, but putting others first and helping others succeed. And through that, you're succeeding yourself. So there could be a title around the servant leadership. It could be serving, right? And hey, I love to cook too, so it could be serving.
So, Hannah, what can we do right now to support your business?
Well, for the entrepreneurs listening in, maybe you can become a supplier and help us with different both new ideas and products and services, right? So we have a supplier portal, so you can go in at www.alom.com, ALOM.com, send good employees to us. Right? So those are two very concrete things. Of course, we are always looking for great customers, but more than that, it's just being part of the ecosystem. And then I'd say for the industry, just we need a lot of really great people in supply chain and getting more, sending young people into the supply chain industry and giving them opportunities, but also keeping everybody's pipeline filled. We are really looking at a shortage of candidates in the supply chain. And I believe that when you're young, you start your career, or even if you want to change career and you're not so young, right? Going into a growing, almost exploding industry, right? It gives you so many opportunities. I think many people go, oh, I wish I was in Silicon Valley when it started exploding, right? Think about all the opportunities. Well, that's where supply chain is now, right? So you really have that opportunity, and long term, it helps everybody in supply chain to get that huge influx of talent out there. So send people into the supply chain industry, please.
What is something that you have not done that you dream about often that you'd like to do?
Oh, there are several things, right? So I mentioned my love for nature and for animals. So maybe running an institution in that area and supporting outreach and understanding in that area could be one thing that I would be interested in. And then solving some of the big problems that we were talking about earlier and really serving the globe as a whole, I think would be another very fulfilling area. And of course, I'm trying to do things also financially now by supporting different institutions. But I think maybe using my talents for that could be very interesting. So, contributing whatever knowledge I have gotten to what I'm doing.
What book would you recommend and why?
Oh, my husband has written several books, and I would definitely recommend reading some of his, right? And he's in the usability field. So his name is Jacob Nielsen, and he's written several bestsellers in the usability field. And so his field very different than mine, as you understand. So we run different businesses. Yeah, also, and of course, I'm from the town of Hans Christian Andersen, the Danish fairy tale teller. So, by some of his books, they are interesting. When you read the fairy tales, there are many layers in them. There's certainly the layer that is just a fun, interesting fairy tale. But when you reach a little bit deeper, there are lots of takeaways. I like to read business books. One book that made a big impression on me some years back was a book of paradoxes, which kind of makes you think about how you run the business. Good to Great certainly is another important business book. One of my best friends wrote a book about careers. So for those of you who are interested in careers, I would say Shelley Archambault, Unapologetically Ambitious. It's a fabulous book. Another of my friends, who is the CEO of Hint Water, wrote Undaunted, and that's for everybody who's thinking about an entrepreneurial career. So they would be some of the business books I would recommend. Fiction, I like to read one sort of more interesting, in-depth book, a Pulitzer Prize winner, Nobel Prize winner, or something a quarter. So I try to, every once in a while, I read some literature that's maybe not Pulitzer Prize winning, right? When you're on a plane, we all remember back those days. I can read the crime stories or, some lighter literature. But I also like to read some of a little bit more insightful. I liked reading Shipping News. That was a novel that really had a big impact on me as I read through it, again, with the different layers and different complexities. So I read a lot. So you got me there.
Hannah, I want you to have a monologue. And I want you to name the person that you're talking to, living or not, you decide. And this person has impacted your life so much. So you're going to name the person. And what would you tell that person?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I've made it a point to try to tell people when they are alive and when they have an impact on me. But my dad had a big impact on me. If I've got to, let me tell my dad's story, because I think it's going to frame the monologue. Right? But my dad grew up in Nazi Germany, and he was persecuted and fled to Denmark and was caught in Denmark and put in concentration camp. And he survived concentration camp barely. He was actually due to be executed the day after the camp was liberated, and came back to Denmark and rebuilt his life. His entire family had been eradicated, and all his life he had regrets about not having had the right start in life. And I think that impacted me a lot. And what I would like to say is the impact he had on me to really live my life, right? That the impact you had on me was I really decided to live my life and live up to whatever, live the dreams I wanted to live. And I hope for everybody else that they will do the same. So he was my dad was my impetus for saying, I have a good start in life and I want to leverage that.
Hannah, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
Well, you're asking some really tough questions, Francis. I don't know that I can compete with you. Maybe I would ask, what is really fulfilling? Hannah, what's really fulfilling for you, right, in life and otherwise? And I think what's really fulfilling is having positive relationships with friends and family and spreading both joy and happiness, but also thoughtfulness and support and helping others through tough times in life, and realizing that there are tough times in life and we all need to help each other through them. So, I think this thing about how do you feel fulfilled in life, I think it's about, for me, it's very much about the community I live in, whether it's at work or outside work, and bringing that mentality into my life and other people's life.
We've come to the part of our interview. It's called Fun Facts Lightning Round. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to give me very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Fun Facts Lightning Round?
Well, after all the tough questions, I don't know, Francis, but let's try.
Your first job.
At 4, my brother and I decided to start a small company. We went over in the forest and we dug up beautiful flowers and we went around selling them to the neighbors. And so that was maybe my first job. But, my first income, I really had 2 jobs. I worked with my dad. My dad had a little side business. He was a college professor, but he had a little side business. And I worked with him. I made money working with him and doing bookkeeping and a number of other things. And then I had several jobs where I trained. I was a tutor, and I also did some library work. I like to make money very early on. So I think, I started really making money when I was 10, 11 years old and just continued.
The last movie you saw.
I just watched a Hitchcock movie with my husband, and that was Vertigo. It's fun with the Vertigo. I probably hadn't seen it for 30 years. It's interesting to see the Hitchcock's attention to detail and all his different, both the camera and the sound and the special effects and the way he works with the actors. And then it was extra fun to see it now. I've lived in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1994. And so I know all the landmarks that he's used for the background. So that added one more layer of satisfaction to seeing it. So yeah, my husband bought some of the old Hitchcock movies, and that's the latest one.
Your favorite color?
I like very bright colors. So maybe it's a purple or a hot pink.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
There's my breakfast food. So I eat a high fiber cereal with different fruits on it and flax milk. So that's very exotic. I can't say that I'm eating the flax milk no matter what, because when I travel, and I used to travel a lot, I wouldn't get flax milk, but I would travel with the cereal, and people would laugh at me at conferences when I pull out my own cereal.
You relax doing what?
I read and I cook, right? And then I used to travel a lot. So I both for business, but also personally, I'm very interested in performing arts. Travel to go to performing arts venues and of course museums. And I'm just a curious person by nature. I like nature, so I do hiking. And as part of traveling, I've been to a lot of nature places, Antarctica, the Arctic region. Of course, I've been on safari and a number of other places.
Your favorite month?
It's the month I'm in now. I celebrate being alive, so I'm not, and celebrate life and celebrate being whatever I'm doing. So my favorite month is this month. So I can't say that I have one favorite month. I've got to say I love the changes of the seasons and seeing the leaves turn, etc. But I also love the spring and the hope coming with spring and certainly summer. So I'm very eclectic.
Hannah, thank you so much for spending time with us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with you.
The best way is probably to go in on the Alom website and look at the www.alom.com, alom.com. And my personal email is hkain@alom.com. So very easy to get a hold of me, and please feel free to reach out if I can be of any help or serve you. And if you've got something you would like me to look at, feel free to reach out. So, and Frances, I want to say thank you for having me, and thank you for making me think so much during the podcast.
You're welcome. That's a wrap.
Subscribe to our mailing list to receive weekly updates and exclusive content delivered right to your inbox. Go to drfrancisrichards.com. That's drfrancisrichards.com to subscribe to our mailing list and be entered into our monthly drawing. That's drfrancisrichards.com, drfrancisrichards.com to subscribe to our mailing list and be entered into our monthly drawing. We promise we won't spam you or sell your information.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.